The legend of Teguayo and the Lake of Copala, a legend that the Spanish explorers who were based in Santa Fe had heard of since settling New Mexico in the late 16th century. According to the legend, Teguayo was a land ruled by a monarch and his sons. The people in Teguayo supposedly lived in a fertile land surrounding a large lake. They spoke many different languages and grew corn, and there was an abundance of cattle and precious metals like silver or gold. Teguayo was also home to a strange, light-skinned people with thick, long beards who dressed in cotton clothing and spoke like the Spaniards. The Lake of Copala in Teguayo led to a possible water route to the Pacific Ocean. Exploration toward this region, both French and Spanish, over the following years, took in reports from multiple native tribes. Rumors and reports, which only served to reaffirm the legend, often gave fairly specific directions and distances to this mythical land. The great search for Teguayo began in 1767 with the Rivera expedition. Juan Maria Antonio de Rivera and his men followed the path that forged the old Spanish trail. They named rivers and plateaus and developed friendships with Ute and Paiute tribes. They did not find rich silver deposits or Teguayo, but they made it as far north as present-day Delta before being forced to turn back by the weather and Comanche raiders. Rivera's odyssey failed and he quickly slipped into obscurity, but he opened the way for others to continue his quest. And in 1776 was the final of 4 different expeditions with Father Velez de Escalante, and Father Dominguez led an expedition that reached Utah Lake in the Wasatch Front. While these expeditions never located a city laden with silver, they paved the way for European settlement of the Southwest and precipitated the gold rush and silver booms of the 19th century. Welcome back to In Search of Tontonteac. This week we are still looking into the Teguayo region or regnum. In our Aztec Detour episode, we took a look at the Old Spanish Trail and this particular map. The map in question was created by Bernardo Miera during the Escalante Dominguez expedition in 1776, including the Lago Salado de Teguayo, translated as the Salt Lake of Teguayo. The expeditions encountered many different, unique tribes during their expeditions: Ute, Paiute, or the Paiuchi Ute, Hopi or the Moki, Havasupai, Mojave, Zuni. The explorers of these expeditions often heard rumors from indigenous peoples about fertile lands and rich deposits of metals, which reinforced the Teguayo legend. However, these reports were never substantiated by physical evidence during these expeditions. Main tribes referenced are shown on this map along with the areas in which the tribes lived. The first 3 expeditions were constantly warned about the Apache tribes, although the expeditions never encountered them. The Hopi and Zuni people, along with other Pueblo tribes, are generally considered descendants of the ancestral Pueblo people, also known as the Anasazi. The Paiute tribe has been often described as living alongside the Anasazi. The Yavapai people are often most noted as being called the Longbeards. Interestingly, early Yavapai people were said to dress in cotton clothing. The Yavapai were also said to be living amongst the Anasazi and the Paiute tribes. Could the bearded descriptions be a misunderstanding of European explorers encountering tribes with facial hair, which may be rare in some Native American groups but not unheard of? It might also help to explain how the Yavapai were described by these explorers and whether there's any concrete evidence to link them with the light-skinned, bearded figures the Spanish were seeking. The Yavapai are traditionally associated with the central and western regions of present-day Arizona rather than Utah. They are, however, part of the human-speaking peoples and are closely related to the Havasupai and Hualapai tribes. As we discussed before, the current understanding of the native tribes is that they are associated by the language. Uto-Aztecan language families include all the tribes of people we have been discussing, including the Hopi, Ute, Paiute, Shoshone, Nahuan or Aztec, the Yavapai, and Quechuan or Yuma. As a matter of fact, most tribes within California, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico spoke variants of this language family. However, strangely, there are some completely different language groups discovered in this region, and they belong to the various different Apache tribes, the Navajo tribe, and the Zunis. Navajo and Apache speak Athabascan languages, which are part of a completely different language family from the Uto-Aztecan group, which is most commonly associated with those around Alaska and Canada. Archaeological and linguistic evidence indicates that the Apache, along with their close relatives, the Navajo, migrated into the American Southwest between 1200 and 1500 CE. This also happens to be the time that the ancestral Puebloan culture made a tremendous shift and moved away from these lands. Now, in our episodes about Quivira, we also heard the people who lived near Quivira were said to live like the Tartars by living in tents. The Apache were known to live in wickiups, while the Navajo were said to have lived in hogans. Interestingly, both of these types of dwelling are reminiscent of what the Tartars living in called yurt. The yurt, wickiups, and hogan are portable and designed to provide shelter in environments with extreme weather conditions, which is important for nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyles. Each are round or dome-shaped, with a central support structure and a roof that can be insulated. If the Quivirans were somewhere in the northwest, it is quite possible that the Navajos and the Apache were Aenians, or the group that was associated at that time with them. Could the invasion of the Navajo and the Apache have forced the movement of these groups out of this area to move further south? This shift in peopling of the American Southwest is most commonly associated with climate changes in the subarctic. It is believed that we went through a little ice age from 900 to 1100 AD. The Zuni's association with the Anasazi comes from their shared material culture and ancestral geography. However, their linguistic uniqueness points to a complex history that likely involves intermingling with and divergence from other ancient populations. With these linguistic and archaeological clues, could the legend of Teguayo point to a real yet lost civilization or region? Was Teguayo a place shaped by these diverse peoples, or was it simply a myth fabricated from centuries of conflicting reports?